Good afternoon and welcome back. The post-lunch session today is on reimagining momentum. It looks to spotlight very, very large global companies that are impacted by disruptions and who have been known to be reinventing themselves. How do elephants learn to dance? That's the question. How do they communicate to a large employee workforce? How do they stay agile and deliver in a rapidly changing business context? I thought since it's post-lunch, we should actually start with a little bit of poetry. A poem that I read in school, If by Rudyard Kipling. Could be contextual. If you keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, not talk too wise. If you can dream and make dreams and not make dreams your master, if you can meet triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. It's a fairly long poem. I'll conclude here, which says, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. This is by Rudyard Kipling, quite a few decades ago, but I found it contextual to the session now. It's our great pleasure and privilege to invite the moderator of the session to take over, Mr. Pratik, Kumar, CEO, Wipro Infrastructure Engineering. So over to you.
Can I request Pravin and Krish also to join me on the dais? So thank you and good afternoon to all of you, and a very warm welcome to this very special panel discussion session which we have. It's my pleasure to have both Krish, who I have known for a very long time, and Pravin on this dais for this particular session. As you all are familiar, there are companies which come and go, and there are companies which come and remain. But it's rare to come across an organization which, right from its inception, they continue to grow in strength, and in the process, reflecting the dreams and aspirations of an emerging India. Infosys, when they started in 1981, from very, very humble beginning, with a mere capital of about 10,000 rupees, to a large global giant nearing $10 billion, employee strength of almost 200,000 people, with their operations all across the globe. It's one fantastic and phenomenal ride, and I think I have some sense of what it actually takes to get there. But I think the story of Infosys, according to me, is not merely about the size, the scale, and the success, but in many ways they have gone in defining new thresholds of practices, be it related to leadership, be it related to people practices, governance practices, which have made them worthy to be emulated by companies both past and present. On a personal note, Infosys and Wipro, the group I have worked with for almost 2.5 decades, we compete hard, but we have a very high degree of regard and admiration for each other. And many a times that transcends into very warm personal friendship. So it's my pleasure to have both Krish and Pravin for this dialogue, to be able to share nuggets of that fantastic journey which Infosys has had, which has gone into defining who they are as an organization. And I'm sure it would be of great value to this audience here. So without much ado, let me straight away jump into the dialogue, and I'm sure we'll have some time where we can take some questions from the audience as well towards the end. So let me begin with Pravin. You've been there for a very long time, and the first question which occurs to me, how's Infosys of today in 2016 different from the time when you joined way back in, was it 1984?
86.
86. What's been that journey like? And I'm not talking about in terms of just the size of the organization revenue, but more in terms of culturally. How is today's Infosys different from what it was in 86 when you had joined?
See, today the business environment is dramatically different from what we have seen in the past. Today we are seeing disruptions all around us. These disruptions are fueled by technology. They are impacting our customers. They are impacting us as well. And this is what most people call it as a digital revolution or transformation. So consequently, this has resulted in companies like us having to transform ourselves culturally as well. So today at a very highest level, we are trying to do three things. We are trying to move away from a people only to a people plus software paradigm. Our belief is future is about platforms. We'll still be a services company, but we'll have services augmented and amplified by software. So that's one dimension that we are pursuing. The second one is more about cultural transformation within the organization. And I will touch upon a little bit on that. And the third aspect is about the ecosystem. Because our belief is today, none of the corporates will have all the skills and capabilities they have. At the same time, a service provider will not have all the skills and capabilities. So increasingly, partnership with ecosystems become a huge thing. And that's going to, and what I'm talking about is something that will be relevant for the next 3 to 5 years as we go through this digital transformation. So from our perspective, from a cultural transformation perspective, we are moving into becoming a much more agile company, much more proactive. We are looking at innovative business solutions, helping our clients renew their existing IT landscapes, at the same time emerge into or embrace some of the newer stuff through using automation, innovation, and so on. So some of the changes that really helps us is one is, of course, our risk appetite has increased tremendously. Most of Infosys life, for the first 33 years, we had just done about 3 acquisitions and 0 investment in any startup. But in the last year itself, we have done about 10 investments, totaling about 50 million plus, and we have done 3 acquisitions as well. So that is something we have done dramatically different. There is a lot more focus on automation. There is a lot more focus on innovation. We have a rule called principle of one. So if you do something once, the belief is the next time and onwards you should do using machines kind of thing. So there is that cultural transformation we are driving across the organization. And a couple of things from a people perspective. Earlier in our industry, being a people manager had its premium, but today it's actually a negative thing. Today we recognize the value of individual contributor. So if someone is a purely people manager, we call him as an aggregator kind of thing, and today aggregators have no role to play kind of thing. You have to be much more closer to code, technology, and so on. So that is the other transformation that's going on. So a whole set of things we are trying to do, and it's not really fair to compare today's versus what has happened in the past. While we have seen disruptions in the past, but the scale at which these disruptions are happening and some of the changes are much more dramatic than we have ever seen in the past. So what we are going through is probably something unique, which at least I have not seen in this industry in the last 30, 35 years, and it's very interesting times.
So which brings me to a related subject. Given some of the new dimensions on which organizations have to now get measured up to be successful. And maybe Krish, you can take this question. Are there a set of new behaviors which you now expect employees of the organization to exhibit and demonstrate consistently so, which would be aligned to the organization vision, the direction in which Infosys is wanting to move forward?
No, I think that's the core element of the transformation. Yeah, because I think the need that we need from employees in terms of their behavior completely changes, because what we have to deliver to our clients and customers completely. What's the thing that we need from employees now? I think ability to question, and innovate. So I think we started something called zero distance. Yeah? And the idea was, how do you really, at zero distance means you get closer to technology, the code, closer to the customers and the business. So each team is really thinking about how can they come up with, what are the things that they can innovate, what can they do better. So it's like the old Kaizen in a form which we are taking different parts of teams and making that. So ability to innovate, I think, is a big thing which we want to look at for all employees. The second one is collaboration and sharing of knowledge. So I think what happens is we want to look at our company like a neural network. If something happens somewhere, say in an account in Apple, immediately we should know, and the same ideas can be transmitted to somebody else sitting in Germany or in UK or some other place. So how do we really transfer this information at the speed of light or whatever it is? So, we want to create neural networks, get this information and share faster. So I think collaboration and sharing is the other thing. So those are what we would expect from a large number of employees. What we've also done is really define what behaviors we would need our leaders to kind of demonstrate. Yeah. And I think broadly, if I were to put it, we put it in 4 broad buckets. Number one, we want our leaders to really inspire transformation. We don't want guys to maintain and do as is, but it is about questioning status quo and coming up with something new. So how does somebody, he or she, inspire transformation? Yeah, so that's number one. Number two is how do they unlock synergies? And synergies exist within the organization with external, with partners and others. How do you really get that win-win, collaborate and unlock synergies? That's the second thing we would look for in terms of behavior. The third one is really how do you amplify the potential of your team? So how do you inspire your team? How do you get them together and amplify their own potential? Yeah? And the last one is really this whole focus on delivering value to the client. So I think we keep these 4 saying, for us, the leaders of the future have to have these kind of behaviors. They should inspire transformation, think, question status quo, kind of look at, build synergies and kind of unlock that as synergies, amplify the potential of the team and deliver value to them. So those are the 4 broad things.
Well put. And, I just have an extension to what you just now said. I think it's commonly understood, and I know the kind of challenge you would have when you look at an organization so dispersed, 200,000 plus employees all across. So what's the mechanism through which you ensure that this is something which is imbibed, not only in the current set of Infosys employees, but the next generation employees who are coming in? Because it's one thing to be able to have some of these as expectations. Ensuring that it gets demonstrated, it's a task by itself. So is there a mechanism?
It's not that easy. I think these will take time and we got to embed it slowly. Yeah. And I think the first thing starts by setting the right expectations and the leaders acting it out. Yeah. And if you were to look at Vishal, one of the key things he does is really sit with teams looking at what are the innovations they do. So every month he gets a VC, a webinar with lots of project teams and looks at how they're doing. So I think these are the kind of behaviors we want to really percolate down so that others can do. What we also do is, in many of these we get, one of the key things is really empower them a lot more. They know where the vision is, where the company is going, so therefore we empower. And with a measure of putting the right KPIs, rewarding the right behaviors, and ensuring most of all that the leaders stand up and kind of demonstrate this behavior. I think that's the way to really bring it down. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think it's a constant thing then.
So let me put this question to you, Pravin, and I think you would be in best position to be able to share it with this audience here. Transition from a set of very, very iconic founders who are so well known to a group of professionals who are at the helm. How easy or difficult has it been for Infosys to have been able to make that transition? And what have been some of the lessons along the way?
Yeah. I think we have been extremely fortunate to have a set of iconic founders, and it's their larger-than-life image, and it's definitely a huge challenge to fill in their shoes. It's difficult to imagine someone as visionary as a Nandan or a Narayan Murthy, or someone with client interfacing skills like Nandan, or a technology guy like a Krish, or an operation guy like a Shibu, or someone like N.S. Raghavan driving the HR practices, HR culture, and so on. So it's extremely difficult to fill in those shoes. Having said that, to their credit, they have always run it as a professional company right from day one. They were a set of professionals. They have continued till they retired and went out of it. They have continued to be very hands-on, very involved in the company. They have laid a very strong foundation on the basis of culture, values, systems, processes, and so on. There has been a lot of focus on people development, a lot of focus on building managers, leaders, and so on. So in that sense, I think the transition has been relatively smooth from a promoter-led company to a CEO coming from outside, because the foundation was extremely strong, and We had a set of process policies, everything. We had a set of leadership, strong leadership bench, and so on. So the transition, because of that ethos in which they have built the company and in which they have run the company, to a large extent, it has been fairly smooth. Obviously, it will take some time because the kind of mind share they have is very difficult to fill. It will take a long time. But those are some things which will come through experience and more outcomes and so on. But it has been not as difficult as I would have thought when most of them retired around the same time. In the run-up to this transition, obviously there were a lot of anticipation, noise, distractions and so on. But post that, once Vishal got identified and came on board, and then the speed with which, and a great deal of credit to Vishal as well, the speed with which he came on board and got ingrained into Infosys' way of doing things. And some of the things he did was extremely different. The first thing he did was to tackle the people, because that was a very critical thing. The first thing he did when he came on board was he said, I want to look at code. Please share me the best code that you have written you are proud of. It can be in any language. So here is a CEO coming from outside and asking that I want to look at code. And he had some 100+ entries. And he actually went through all the 100 entries. He praised some, critiqued some, asked someone, why can't we convert it into an IP and those kind of things. That was a huge hit, because people were extremely thrilled. And the amount of hands-on and amount of technology depth he brings in, and particularly in today's time, it is extremely relevant. At least at the ground level, it was a huge hit. Obviously, at a middle and senior level, when there was a new leadership, obviously there is a little bit of anxiety and other thing. That took some time for that to settle down. But at a grassroots level, till about middle management level, he was an instant hit, and he was like a rock star that I have not seen since the days of Murthy and Nandan. So that also helped a lot in terms of doing it. So obviously, success so far, in the last 2 years, we have had fair amount of successes, though industry itself is going through tough times now. So the transition has been probably much more smoother than what I would have imagined.
It's very good. And I think there's an important lesson. The initial set of people who are at the helm, they invested considerably in setting the right cultural tone as well as setting all those building blocks.
Yeah.
So the future generation of professionals who are today, it's a lot easier for them to be able to carry the baton forward.
Sure.
Krish, let me ask you, and since you are relatively new in the organization, and I'm sure there are people who must be approaching you and telling you about the old Infi versus the new Infi. Do you see a new set of aspirations which the current set of Infosians have when you listen to them and relate it to what perhaps around the time when Pravin and others would have actually joined the organization?
Well, no, I think if I look at and what I see people, I think one of the things they're really inspired is this vision of Infosys being a company it's got a great legacy of being a pioneer in the IT services industry, among the Indian industry. So I think what they feel is, how can we be a pioneer in this whole software plus services kind of a thing? And I think that really, we got huge scale. We got huge scale, huge credibility, lot of talent. How do we really make a mark in this whole software plus services? And really, can we ride that wave? And, so that's the kind of thing that they all look at. I think sometimes they also like this whole thing about looking at newer things, and doing something new. So there is this whole thing about innovation and coming up with something new is also inspiring a lot of them. So it's not just maintaining what it is, let's try and do something new. So I think they're inspired by this software plus services story that I see.
So Pravin, if all of us get wiser with the benefit of hindsight, right? And in the long journey of any organization, there are a lot of hits, but there are a few misses as well. And if you had the luxury of being able to just rewind the clock, and if you were to do few things, or rather, I would say, if Infosys had to do few things differently, what would be some of those which you may like to share?
See, obviously, hindsight is 20/20. Having said that, to a large extent, I think we have been a successful company. We have been one of the few companies setting the standard, been pioneers of the global delivery model. We are very proud of our role in putting India on the global map. In some sense, we have been instrumental in defining the corporate governance standards and so on. So, to a large extent, we are proud of what we have achieved, and maybe around the time when we started, first few years, if we had said that we'll become a 10 billion company, I don't think anyone would have really, in our wildest imagination, believed where we are. So, in that sense, looking at where we are today, very few complaints. And we have had our shares of ups and downs, but it has been mostly ups kind of thing. Only if I have to look back in a very critical way to see what we could have probably done differently, I think in probably during the period of say 2010 to 2012, 2013, we could have probably been much more aggressive, much more risk-taking in the market. So that's the time we really lost out. And for a company of our size and scales, if you miss out on certain things, it takes a long time to get out of it. And we really struggled a lot for a few years. Because we were not really aggressive, we didn't listen to the customer, we didn't understand what was happening in the market. We thought it'll go back to the old days and so on kind of thing. So that's something we could have done differently. And the other thing perhaps we could have done differently is to, we went through a period of time when there was a lot of distractions around succession, management transition and so on. So that also, to be honest, we could have probably handled it differently in a much better way than how it eventually panned out. So those are probably the regrets, and most of it is in the last few years. The first 20, 30 years, I think most of it was extremely smooth with few downs.
And I guess that's the other side of success, because you're under enormous media scrutiny all the time, right? So it's not a day which goes by when someone or the other is not interested in knowing what's happening around. Let me take you to another subject, and that's something which I think for all large IT services company, and it would equally be true for Infy as well, there is a new age competition which is out there for talent. And there is a view that some of the large IT services organizations which had the best of presence in campuses for the top talent, they are not necessarily the most attractive destination. This is a view. If that be so, given the fact that there are more nimble, more glamorous, new set of startups and whatnot, they are coming in, and they are the new set of challenges. If you're not able to still be attractive enough for the best talent on campuses, which is a real true funnel for your new next generation of employees, how does one remain relevant? So first of all, and either of you can take this, whether you agree to this notion, and if so, what are few things which Infy is planning to do or is doing, which would be interesting for this audience to know?
Of talent is perpetual. Yeah, it's like a treadmill. You can't stay and say, listen, I'm going to get all the best talent always, because we got to keep working on it. And I think with lots of newer options for people, lots of smaller, nimbler companies, people have many more options. I think, but the core thing that they're looking for doesn't change. I think they're looking for lots of learning and opportunity to contribute. I think if we can keep working on it on a value proposition and say, this is what is going to distinguish working in Infosys versus somewhere else, that's going to be the key thing for them. So I think we see a lot more that we can offer them. Because our focus is, it's not just traditional IT services. We are saying, listen, we are lots into innovative services, plus we are into software. So I think the opportunities to really grow is much more. So I think we are focusing a lot more on a value proposition, ensuring that there's this thing about you can learn a lot, and contribute. The focus on early training is phenomenal. I think we still be, among the best in that area. So we want to continue on that. So that if somebody works in Infosys, let's say 5 to 7 years, what is going to learn and contribute is going to be unmatched compared to anywhere else. That's going to be what we are trying to really focus on. And we're trying to do also at the same time, given the new age employees, we're trying to give them options in which they learn on their own. We're trying to make it a little bit, in a way, more self-driven for them to really understand what is the career path they want to do, what are the learnings they need to do, apply for jobs within, apply for mentors within, be parts of communities within. So therefore, we are using technology to really enable this kind of a learning, which is much more peer and much more voluntary kind of a learning, I think, and also participation in projects. One more example. For example, we have all this bench, people sitting on bench waiting for projects to come. We've got something called Project Accelerate. That means anybody in the company can put up projects and anybody who's on the bench can bid for it. So that way they can learn lots of new things. And I think we in HR, we put up certain projects where people have kind of bid for it and they did, and that way they started learning. So I think our job is to create the avenues for learning through these marketplace kind of approaches so that people can learn. And also ensure that the value proposition of the best learning and the best contribution that you can make continues. I think those two would be the key.
I mean, you have something to add to this?
So yeah, apart from, Chris talked about it, the biggest value proposition is the learning value add that has been a very strong foundation and differentiator for Infosys. So that's something we continue to invest on. Couple of other things, obviously, the vision makes a difference, and now we have a probably much more compelling vision. What we are trying to do over the next 3 to 5 years, how we are transforming the company. Those are the messages we are keep on reinforcing, and so that also makes Infosys a much more value proposition. And obviously, we can't ignore on the financial dimension as well. So we are also creating. We have created a separate stream called Expert Stream, where we handpick people from IITs and IIMs in that particular stream with a significantly different compensation. And these people are in a separate stream. They are targeted to work on platforms, some of the newer stuff, and so on. So it's a combination of things we try to do. And in my mind, I don't think, we are at 200,000 and every year we typically recruit some 10 to 20,000 people. I don't think we need 10 to 20,000 of people from these institutes or anything, and you will never have those kind of people anyways. We are really talking about ability to attract some 100 or 200 people from these institutes to work in some of your critical projects and who will probably be your technology evangelists going forward. So, that's the approach we have taken.
Good. So, big can continue to be beautiful and can be nimble enough and have got much more to offer. But I'm just picking on the last aspect of your response, where you spoke about really your need to be able to hire in such large numbers may not be of the same proportion as it was in the past. And that's something which one has been hearing quite a bit in the last couple of years with the advent of new technology, whether it's automation, whether it's AI. There is almost near unanimity that is going to have an impact on the workforce of the future. What do you think? And once again, this question is to both of you. What do you think is the likely first of all, from your prism, what is this workforce of the future likely to look like, and what is the implication or significance of that for Infi?
Yeah. See, obviously,